I said sit down. What part of the emergency don't you understand, girl? Sarah Mitchell's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. The white flight attendant's manicured finger jabbed toward economy class with pure disdain. Ma'am, both engines are gone. I have aviation training that could save— Training? Sarah's laugh was cruel and sharp. What training? Some community college courses? This is real life, not your little fantasy. Go back to your discount seat and let the real professionals handle this emergency. You're making a fatal mistake, Maya Johnson said quietly, standing steady despite the plane's violent shaking at 35,000 feet. The only mistake here is thinking some welfare passenger like you could save anyone. Sarah's voice turned vicious. Flight AA 2847 continued its deadly descent toward the icy waters below, 180 souls aboard, while the Boeing 737's alarms screamed through the cabin. What Sarah Mitchell didn't know was that she had just dismissed the one person who could save everyone on that aircraft. Just minutes earlier, Flight AA 2847 had been the picture of routine commercial aviation. The Boeing 737-800 had departed San Diego International Airport at 2:15 p.m. Pacific Time, carrying 180 passengers on what should have been a peaceful 2-hour journey to Seattle-Tacoma International. The weather had been perfect, clear skies, light winds, visibility unlimited. Captain James Turner, a 20-year veteran with over 15,000 flight hours, had expected nothing more challenging than normal afternoon traffic control delays. Maya Johnson had boarded quietly, her military-issued duffel bag stowed carefully in the overhead compartment above seat 14C. To any casual observer, she appeared to be just another budget traveler, a young black woman in faded jeans, worn sneakers, and a simple navy sweater that had seen better days. Her carry-on bag contained a paperback novel, a water bottle, and something else carefully wrapped in cloth that she had positioned with deliberate precision. The other passengers barely glanced at her as they settled into their seats, their attention focused on business calls, tablets, or conversations about weekend plans. But Maya's trained eyes had been working from the moment she stepped aboard. She had automatically noted the emergency exit locations, counted the rows to each one, and observed the flight crew's pre-flight procedures with the unconscious thoroughness of someone whose life had once depended on such details. Her gaze lingered briefly on the cockpit door, calculating sight lines and access routes. When the flight attendants demonstrated safety procedures, Maya silently noted which passengers were paying attention and which were not, information that could prove crucial in an emergency. Sarah Mitchell commanded the cabin with the confidence of 15 years in commercial aviation. At 42, she had worked her way up from regional carriers to major airlines, earning her position as senior flight attendant through a combination of strict adherence to protocol and an unwavering belief in her own authority. Her blonde hair was pulled back in the regulation style, her uniform pressed to perfection, and her smile carried the professional warmth that masked an iron will to maintain order at all costs. She took pride in running what she called a tight ship, and passengers quickly learned not to challenge her rules. The supporting cast of Flight AA 2847 represented a cross-section of American society. Mark Rodriguez, the junior flight attendant, was 3 years into his aviation career and still possessed the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely enjoyed helping passengers. His dark eyes missed little, and unlike Sarah, he had not yet developed the automatic assumptions that came with seniority. In seat 3A, Dr. Robert Sterling adjusted his gold watch and checked his phone one last time before takeoff. His first-class ticket, expensive suit, and air of entitlement marked him as a man accustomed to deference and special treatment. Mrs. Eleanor Carter occupied the window seat next to Maya in 14B. At 73, the retired schoolteacher had been visiting her grandson in San Diego and was returning to her home in Bellevue. Her gentle eyes and patient demeanor had earned Maya's immediate respect during their brief pre-flight conversation. Unlike the other passengers, Mrs. Carter had actually looked at Maya when she spoke, a small courtesy that had not gone unnoticed. In the cockpit, Captain Turner and First Officer Lisa Park had been discussing the optimal flight path to Seattle when disaster struck. Turner's steady hands had guided aircraft through everything from severe thunderstorms to hydraulic failures, but the simultaneous loss of both engines was beyond even his extensive experience. Park, 8 years his junior with impeccable technical skills, was already working through emergency checklists with methodical precision. The Boeing 737-800 itself was a testament to modern aviation engineering. Built in 2019, it had accumulated just over 4,000 flight hours and maintained a perfect safety record. Its twin CFM56 engines had been designed to handle bird strikes, but the massive Canadian geese flock had overwhelmed even their robust construction. Now, with both engines silent and the aircraft beginning its inexorable descent toward Puget Sound, the plane had become a glider with limited time and options. Below them stretched the Pacific Northwest in all its afternoon glory. Dense forests, snow-capped mountains, and the deep blue waters that would soon become their only hope for survival. The initial shock of the bird strike had barely subsided when Maya made her first attempt to help. As passengers around her screamed and fumbled with oxygen masks, she moved with the calm precision of someone trained for crisis management. Her first instinct was to assess the cockpit situation, so she unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped into the aisle, her dark eyes already calculating the plane's descent rate from the subtle changes in engine noise and cabin pressure. "Excuse me," Maya said, approaching Sarah with respectful urgency. "I need to speak with the flight crew immediately. I have extensive aviation experience that could—" Sarah whirled around, her face flushed with the adrenaline of emergency procedures. "Ma'am, are you a licensed commercial pilot?" Her voice carried the sharp edge of someone whose authority was being questioned at the worst possible moment. "I'm military trained with significant flight hours and emergency landing experience." "That's not the same thing." Sarah's interruption was swift and final. "Commercial aviation has specific protocols that military personnel don't understand. Please return to your seat and let the qualified professionals handle this situation." Dr. Sterling looked up from his first-class seat, his gold watch catching the overhead light as he gestured dismissively. "For God's sake, Sarah, maintain order. The last thing we need is some panicked passenger making things worse with amateur advice." Maya felt the familiar sting of assumptions based on appearance, but she pressed forward. Through the cockpit door, she could hear the pilots struggling with emergency procedures, and her trained ear caught a critical error in their radio communications. They were calculating glide ratios for a 737 300 series aircraft, not the 800 series they were actually flying, a mistake that could prove fatal in a water landing scenario. "Listen carefully," Maya said, moving closer to Sarah despite the flight attendant's obvious resistance. "The pilots are using the wrong glide calculations. I can hear them from here, and they're about to make an approach that will put us in the shipping lanes instead of clear water. The weight distribution on this aircraft variant requires different descent parameters." Sarah's expression hardened with condescension. "Ma'am, I appreciate your concern, but unless you have commercial certification, instrument ratings, and emergency water landing experience, you have no business offering technical advice during a crisis like this. You're creating panic with your amateur observations." Mark Rodriguez, the junior flight attendant, paused in his safety checks. Something in Maya's voice, the calm certainty, the precise technical language, the specific aviation terminology, didn't match Sarah's dismissive assessment. "Sarah, maybe we should at least listen to what she's saying. She seems to understand the technical aspects." "Mark, we follow protocol," Sarah snapped, her voice rising with irritation. "We do not allow untrained passengers to interfere with emergency procedures, no matter what they think they know from watching Top Gun movies or reading Wikipedia articles online." The humiliation escalated when other passengers began to notice the exchange. Dr. Sterling stood from his first-class seat, his expensive suit and air of authority commanding immediate attention from nearby passengers. "Young lady, I don't know what you think you're accomplishing here, but this is neither the time nor the place for attention-seeking behavior. Let the educated adults handle this emergency while you sit down and stay quiet like the rest of us." Maya's jaw tightened, but she maintained her military composure. "Sir, with respect, this has nothing to do with attention. Lives are at stake, and I have specific technical knowledge that could save everyone aboard this aircraft if you would just—" "Specific knowledge?" Dr. Sterling's laugh was cruel and patronizing, designed to humiliate her in front of the other passengers. What specific knowledge could someone like you possibly have about complex aviation emergencies? Did you take a community college course? Watch some Discovery Channel documentaries? This is real life, not a classroom exercise or your little fantasy. The words, "someone like you," hung in the air with their unmistakable racist implication. Other passengers turned to stare, their expressions ranging from uncomfortable curiosity to open disapproval. Maya felt the weight of their assumptions. A young black woman in discount clothing, economy class seating, and casual attire presuming to know more than the wealthy white businessman in first class and the experienced white flight crew. An elderly white man in row 12 shook his head disapprovingly. Some people never know their place, do they? Always trying to be the center of attention during a crisis. A middle-aged woman across the aisle whispered loudly to her husband, "Probably thinks she knows better than people who actually went to college and have real jobs. It's always the ones who contribute the least who have the most opinions." Sarah seized the moment to reassert her authority and put Maya firmly in her place. She activated the cabin intercom, her voice projecting throughout the aircraft with professional command and barely concealed irritation. "Ladies and gentlemen, please ignore any advice or suggestions from passengers during this emergency. Only certified crew members and qualified aviation personnel will be handling this situation. I repeat, do not listen to passenger advice, no matter how confident or knowledgeable it may sound. Untrained interference could cost lives." The announcement was clearly and deliberately directed at Maya, and every passenger understood the message perfectly. Conversation stopped, heads turned in her direction, and Maya found herself completely isolated in the aisle while disapproving stares fixed on her from all directions. The implication was crystal clear. She was the dangerous, attention-seeking problem passenger Sarah was warning them about. "Some people just want to be heroes, don't they?" Dr. Sterling said loudly enough for half the cabin to hear, his voice dripping with disdain. "Always trying to insert themselves into situations they don't understand and don't belong in. It's pathetic, really. Absolutely pathetic." A businessman behind him nodded in agreement. "Probably watched one too many action movies and thinks she's some kind of expert. Reality check. This isn't Hollywood, sweetheart." Maya returned to her seat, her cheeks burning with the unfairness and cruelty of it all. She had tried to help, tried to share potentially life-saving information based on genuine expertise, and had been dismissed, publicly humiliated, and branded as a dangerous attention seeker whose advice could cost lives. Mrs. Carter, the elderly Asian woman beside her, reached over and patted Maya's hand gently with grandmother-like kindness. "I believe you know exactly what you're talking about, dear," she whispered conspiratorially. "Some people can't see past their own narrow assumptions and prejudices, but I've been watching you since we boarded. You're not like the others." But Maya's isolation was now complete and total. The other passengers actively avoided eye contact. Sarah maintained her vigilant watch to ensure no further dangerous interference, and the plane continued its deadly descent toward the frigid waters of Puget Sound, while critical errors in approach calculations and emergency protocols went completely uncorrected. The irony was devastating. The one person aboard with the expertise to save them all had been silenced by the very prejudices that could now cost everyone their lives. 8 minutes had passed since the bird strike, and the atmosphere in the cabin was shifting from panic to grim acceptance. Passengers who had initially screamed were now sitting in tense silence, gripping their armrests as the Boeing 737 continued its controlled descent toward the waters below. The oxygen masks swayed gently with each subtle movement of the aircraft, a constant reminder of their precarious situation. It was then that Mrs. Eleanor Carter began experiencing chest pains. The 73-year-old woman suddenly gasped, her weathered hand clutching at her heart as her breathing became rapid and shallow. The rapid altitude changes and stress of the emergency were triggering what appeared to be a cardiac episode, her face growing pale as she struggled for air. "Help," she whispered weakly. I can't breathe properly." Sarah rushed over immediately, her emergency medical training kicking in as she knelt beside the elderly woman. She checked Mrs. Carter's pulse, loosened her collar, and began administering basic first aid according to standard flight attendant protocols. But within moments, it became clear that Sarah's training wasn't sufficient for this particular medical emergency. "Her pulse is irregular," Sarah said, uncertainty creeping into her voice for the first time. "And her breathing is getting worse. I don't understand what's happening." Maya watched from her seat for exactly 10 seconds before her military medical training overrode all concerns about further humiliation. She quietly unbuckled her seatbelt and knelt beside Mrs. Carter without asking permission from Sarah. "Mrs. Carter, look directly at me," Maya said, her voice carrying a tone of calm authority that immediately captured the elderly woman's attention. "I need you to breathe with my count. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. Follow my rhythm exactly." Maya placed her hands in a specific position on Mrs. Carter's chest and shoulders, using advanced pressure point techniques she had learned during military medical emergency training. Her movements were precise and confident, demonstrating knowledge that went far beyond basic first aid. "The cabin pressure changes are affecting her heart rhythm," Maya explained to Sarah while continuing her treatment. At her age, the rapid altitude shifts combined with stress can trigger arrhythmia. She needs to be positioned at exactly this angle to optimize blood flow and cardiac function. Mark Rodriguez watched in fascination as Maya's technique proved immediately effective. Mrs. Carter's breathing began to steady, her color improved, and her pulse returned to a more normal rhythm within minutes. The precision of Maya's medical intervention was far beyond anything he had seen from standard passenger assistants. "How do you know those techniques?" Mark asked quietly, genuine curiosity replacing his earlier deference to Sarah's authority. "Advanced medical training for high-stress situations," Maya replied without elaborating, her attention focused entirely on monitoring Mrs. Carter's recovery. "The positioning is critical for altitude-related cardiac distress." Sarah watched with growing confusion as Maya's medical intervention succeeded where her own training had fallen short. The techniques Maya was using weren't taught in standard flight attendant courses. They required specialized knowledge that suggested far more extensive training than any civilian would typically possess. While treating Mrs. Carter, Maya's trained ear continued monitoring the cockpit radio communications through the partially open door. What she heard confirmed her worst fears. The pilots were still using incorrect approach calculations for their specific aircraft variant, and their current trajectory would put them directly in the path of container ship traffic in the Sound. "Mark," Maya said quietly, still monitoring Mrs. Carter's pulse, "the cockpit radio chatter includes coordinates that will take us into the commercial shipping lanes. The pilots are calculating for the wrong aircraft weight distribution. We need to be in the clear water zone approximately 2 miles north of their current target." Mark's eyes widened. "How do you know navigation coordinates? And how can you tell the difference in aircraft variants from audio alone?" Maya paused her medical treatment to look directly at him. "Because I've planned emergency water landings before, multiple times. That coordination zone they're targeting has active container ship traffic this time of day. The clear zone I'm referencing has Coast Guard positioning advantages and optimal water depth for emergency recovery." The specificity of Maya's knowledge was impossible to dismiss. She wasn't speaking in general terms or repeating information from movies. She was citing precise navigational data, aircraft specifications, and emergency protocols with the confidence of someone who had actually implemented such procedures. Sarah overheard the conversation and found herself caught between her instinct to maintain authority and the growing realization that Maya's expertise might be genuine. "How could you possibly know Coast Guard positioning and water depth charts for this area?" "Because professional pilots study emergency landing zones for every route they fly," Maya replied matter-of-factly. "It's standard procedure to know your options before you need them." Mrs. Carter, now breathing normally thanks to Maya's intervention, grasped Maya's hand with surprising strength. "You saved my life, dear. You're not ordinary, are you? There's something special about you, something these others can't see." A young boy across the aisle had been watching the entire medical emergency unfold. He tugged on his mother's sleeve and whispered loudly, "Mom, that lady talks like the pilots do on the airplane shows. She knows the same words they use." His innocent observation carried more weight than the dismissals from the adults. Children often noticed patterns that adults missed, and his comment highlighted what was becoming increasingly obvious. Maya's vocabulary, techniques, and knowledge base were identical to those of professional aviation personnel. Mark approached Sarah quietly. "Sarah, she really does seem to understand aviation procedures at a professional level. Maybe we should consider—" "Consider what?" Sarah interrupted, but her voice lacked its earlier certainty. The successful medical intervention had planted seeds of doubt about her initial assessment of Maya's qualifications. Maya carefully helped Mrs. Carter return to a comfortable position, checking her pulse one final time before returning to her own seat. As she did, her carry-on bag shifted slightly in the overhead compartment, and a corner of an official-looking document became visible through the partially opened zipper. Mark noticed the document and found himself wondering what other credentials Maya might be carrying that would explain her unusual combination of medical training, aviation knowledge, and crisis management skills. 5 minutes remained until water impact, and the pilots' voices over the radio were becoming increasingly strained as they struggled with approach calculations they didn't fully understand. Maya sat quietly in her seat, having proven her competence in one area while the larger crisis continued to unfold around her. The tension in the cabin reached a breaking point when Captain Turner's voice crackled over the intercom, strained and desperate in a way that sent chills through every passenger aboard. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We are currently experiencing a dual engine failure and are preparing for an emergency water landing in approximately 4 minutes. At this time, we need any passenger with aviation experience to identify themselves immediately. I repeat, any passenger with flight training or aviation expertise, please make yourself known to the cabin crew." The silence that followed was deafening. 180 people sat frozen in their seats, the weight of the captain's desperation settling over them like a shroud. This wasn't a routine emergency announcement. This was a pilot admitting he needed help from passengers to save their lives. Maya stood slowly, her movements deliberate and dignified despite the chaos around her. Every eye in the cabin turned toward her as she stepped into the aisle for what felt like the 100th time. Sarah instinctively moved to intercept her. "Ma'am, I already told you." "Sarah," Maya said, her voice cutting through the flight attendant's objection with quiet steel. 180 people are about to die. I can help them. Will you let me? Or will you let your prejudice kill everyone aboard this aircraft?" The bluntness of Maya's words hit the cabin like a physical blow. No one had spoken so directly about what everyone was thinking, that Sarah's dismissal of Maya might be costing them their only chance at survival. Dr. Sterling, his earlier arrogance replaced by visible panic, suddenly stood from his first-class seat. "Oh, for crying out loud, what could she possibly know that the pilots don't already know?" But his voice cracked with fear, undermining the authority he had wielded so confidently minutes earlier. Maya turned to face him directly. "More than you realize, Doctor. Far more than you could ever imagine." Mark stepped forward, his 3 years of experience finally giving him the courage to challenge his superior. "Sarah, she saved Mrs. Carter's life using techniques I've never seen before. She knows navigation coordinates, aircraft specifications, medical procedures. Maybe we should actually listen to her." "I am responsible for passenger safety," Sarah snapped, but her voice lacked its earlier conviction. "I cannot allow unqualified individuals to interfere with—" "Then let me prove my qualifications," Maya interrupted, her military bearing becoming more evident with each word. "What exactly would satisfy you, Sarah? What proof do you need to let me help save lives? Commercial pilot's license, flight instructor certification, emergency landing credentials, something official," Sarah demanded, though even she seemed to realize how unrealistic her requirements were given their circumstances. Maya paused, looking directly into Sarah's eyes. "You want credentials? You want something official?" The challenge hung in the air as Maya reached toward the overhead compartment. Her fingers closed around her carry-on bag, and she slowly lowered it to the floor. Every passenger watched in tense silence as she unzipped the main compartment. "Sarah, you've spent the last 15 minutes telling everyone that I'm unqualified, dangerous, and delusional," Maya said, her voice carrying to every corner of the cabin. "You've humiliated me, dismissed my attempts to help, and convinced these passengers that I'm nothing more than an attention-seeking troublemaker." Dr. Sterling shifted uncomfortably in his seat, suddenly aware of how cruel his earlier comments had been. "You told me to let the men handle this situation," Maya continued, her hand resting on the zipper of an inner compartment. "You assumed that someone who looks like me, dressed like me, sitting in economy class, couldn't possibly have the expertise to help in a crisis like this." Sarah's face had gone pale, a growing realization dawning that she might have made a catastrophic error in judgment. "You want to see credentials?" Maya asked, her voice rising just enough to carry absolute authority. "You want to know who you've been dismissing for the last 20 minutes while this plane falls out of the sky?" The cockpit radio crackled with increasing urgency as the pilots struggled with calculations they didn't fully understand. Time was running out, and everyone aboard knew it. Maya's hand moved to extract what appeared to be an official logbook from her bag. The leather cover was worn but maintained with military precision, and even from a distance, passengers could see official stamps and governmental insignia. "You're about to find out exactly who you've been telling to sit down and be quiet," Maya said, opening the logbook to reveal page after page of flight records, certifications, and mission documentation. Mrs. Carter squeezed Maya's free hand encouragingly. Mark stared in anticipation. Dr. Sterling leaned forward despite himself, and Sarah Mitchell stood frozen, finally beginning to understand the magnitude of her mistake. The plane continued its descent toward Puget Sound, but the real revelation was just beginning. Maya rolled up her left sleeve with deliberate precision, revealing an aviator watch that caught the cabin light like a beacon of truth. The timepiece wasn't an ordinary civilian accessory. It bore the distinctive squadron insignia that every passenger recognized from countless movies and television shows. Dr. Sterling's mouth fell open. Is that actually real?" "Squadron VF-31 Tomcatters," Maya said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of absolute truth. "Top Gun class of 2018. The gasps that rippled through the cabin were audible even over the aircraft's struggling systems. Passengers leaned forward in their seats, straining to see the insignia that proved everything they had assumed about Maya Johnson was completely wrong. Maya opened her flight logbook, the pages revealing an incredible record of aviation achievement. Mark read over her shoulder, his voice barely above a whisper. "FA-18 Super Hornet, 2,247 flight hours, aircraft carrier landings." 47 carrier landings, Maya corrected, turning to another page. 12 emergency water recoveries. 6 combat missions I'm not authorized to discuss. Sarah Mitchell staggered backward as if physically struck, her hand covering her mouth in horror. You're actually—" Maya looked directly into Sarah's eyes, her voice steady and professional. "Lieutenant Commander Maya Johnson, United States Navy. I'm a Top Gun pilot." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Dr. Sterling collapsing back into his first-class seat. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Oh my God, what have we done?" "You dismissed the most qualified person on this aircraft," Maya said simply, without malice or anger. "A pilot who has successfully executed emergency water landings in conditions far more challenging than these." A teenage passenger in row 18 broke the stunned silence. "Mom, she's a real Top Gun pilot, like in the movies, but real!" Mrs. Carter smiled through her tears, squeezing Maya's hand. "I knew you were special, dear. I could see it in your eyes from the moment you sat down." Sarah found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "Why didn't you tell us immediately? Why didn't you identify yourself when the emergency began?" Maya's response cut through the cabin like a blade of truth. "I tried. Multiple times. You told me to sit down and let the men handle it. You said I was unqualified, dangerous, and delusional. You announced over the intercom that passengers should ignore my advice because it could cost lives." The weight of Sarah's mistakes settled over the cabin like a suffocating blanket. Every passenger remembered her dismissive announcements, her cruel assumptions, her absolute certainty that Maya couldn't possibly help. "Ma'am, Sarah's voice cracked with the beginning of tears. "I'm so sorry. I was completely wrong. About everything." "Apologies later," Maya said, her tone shifting to pure command authority. "Lives first." Captain Turner's voice crackled over the intercom with renewed hope. "Commander Johnson, we need you in the cockpit immediately. We're 2 minutes from water impact and we need your expertise." Maya strode toward the cockpit with the bearing of someone accustomed to command, removing her casual sweater to reveal a navy t-shirt underneath. The transformation was remarkable. Same person, completely different context, and suddenly every passenger could see the military officer who had been hidden in plain sight. "Permission to assist the flight crew, Sarah?" Sarah stepped aside immediately. Her earlier authority completely evaporated. "Yes, ma'am. Please, save us." As Maya entered the cockpit, Dr. Sterling called out desperately, "Commander Johnson, I owe you the deepest apology. I was wrong about everything." Maya paused at the cockpit door, looking back at the man who had humiliated her so publicly. "Doctor, when we're all safely on the ground, we'll talk. Right now, I have work to do." The cockpit door closed behind her, leaving a cabin full of passengers who finally understood they had been in the presence of a genuine American hero and had spent 20 minutes treating her like an unwelcome nuisance. Maya slid into the co-pilot seat with the fluid precision of someone who had occupied similar positions countless times before. Her hands moved across the instrument panel with muscle memory that amazed both Captain Turner and First Officer Park, adjusting controls and reading displays with the confidence of a seasoned professional. "Commander Johnson," Captain Turner said, relief flooding his voice, "I've logged 20 years and 15,000 hours, but I've never attempted a water landing. You have command of this aircraft." "Roger that, Captain," Maya replied, her voice transforming into the calm authority of a military pilot. "I have the aircraft. First Officer Park, continue with the emergency checklist. All stations, this is Commander Johnson. Prepare for controlled water impact in 90 seconds. Maya's trained eyes swept across the instrument panel, instantly processing information that had been overwhelming the civilian pilots. She calculated wind speed, water temperature, optimal approach angle, and impact velocity with the speed of a computer, her mind drawing on hundreds of hours of emergency landing training that few pilots ever received. "Wind speed 12 knots from the northwest, water temperature 47 degrees Fahrenheit, she announced, her hands making micro-adjustments to the aircraft's trim. "We need a 15-degree nose-up attitude at impact, 125 knots airspeed, flaps full, landing gear up, all engines secured." Captain Turner watched in amazement as Maya manipulated controls he had barely considered. "Commander, how do you know these exact specifications?" "I've done this before, Captain," Maya said, her eyes never leaving the instruments. "Different aircraft, same physics. The key is keeping the aircraft's belly parallel to the water surface while maintaining just enough forward speed to prevent stalling." Through the cockpit windows, the dark waters of Puget Sound rushed up to meet them. Maya could see container ships in the distance, exactly where the pilots had been planning to land, and commercial fishing vessels scattered throughout the sound. Her calculations had been correct. The original approach would have been catastrophic. "All passengers brace positions now," Maya commanded over the intercom. "Remove shoes, jewelry, and any sharp objects. Secure loose items. On my count, assume crash position and do not move until I give the all clear." In the cabin behind her, 180 people followed her orders without question. The authority in her voice, the precision of her instructions, and the knowledge that a genuine Top Gun pilot was now controlling their fate had transformed their panic into disciplined trust. "Altitude 1,000 feet and descending," First Officer Park called out. Maya adjusted the aircraft's glide path with surgical precision, compensating for variables that the other pilots hadn't even considered. "We're coming in slightly heavy due to the remaining fuel load. I'm adjusting our approach angle to account for the extra weight and maintain optimal impact characteristics." "How are you calculating these adjustments so quickly?" Captain Turner asked, watching Maya's hands move across controls with practiced efficiency. "Carrier landings, Captain," Maya replied without taking her eyes off the rapidly approaching water. "I've landed FA-18 Super Hornets on moving aircraft carriers in 40-foot swells during storm conditions. This Boeing 737 on calm water is actually more forgiving than what I trained for." Maya's fingers established emergency communications with rescue coordination. "Seattle Center, this is Flight AA 2847 declaring emergency water landing. Requesting immediate Coast Guard rescue coordination, Puget Sound clear water zone." The response crackled back immediately. Flight 2847, Coast Guard rescue assets deploying to your coordinates. At 500 feet altitude, a sudden crosswind gust threatened to tip the aircraft's wings, a potentially fatal deviation that could cause the plane to cartwheel across the water's surface. Maya's response was instantaneous. Left rudder, slight aileron adjustment, and a barely perceptible throttle correction that kept the aircraft perfectly level. "Jesus Christ," Captain Turner breathed. "How did you react that fast?" "Muscle memory," Maya said simply. "When you've landed jets in 30-knot crosswinds on a carrier deck that's pitching and rolling in heavy seas, your reflexes adapt to compensate before your conscious mind even registers the threat." 400 feet, Park announced, her voice tight with tension. Maya continued her commentary, maintaining focus while educating the other pilots. "We're coming in at an optimal angle now. The key is to let the tail touch first, then keep the nose up as long as possible to minimize impact forces on the passenger compartment." At 300 feet, Maya could see individual whitecaps on the water's surface, helping her gauge wind direction and wave patterns. Her carrier training had taught her to read water conditions like a book, identifying the smoothest possible touchdown zone. "Coast Guard rescue swimmers are in position," the radio crackled. "We have visuals on your aircraft. Outstanding approach, Commander." 200 feet, Park called out. Maya's hands tightened on the controls as the critical moment approached. Every passenger's life depended on the next 30 seconds, and she drew on every hour of training, every emergency drill, every carrier landing she had ever performed. "All passengers, this is Commander Johnson," she announced over the intercom. "We are 30 seconds from the water impact. Brace positions now. Do not move until I give the all clear. Stay calm. We've got this." At 100 feet, Maya could see her reflection in the water's surface. The approach was perfect. Wings level, nose slightly elevated, airspeed exactly where it needed to be for optimal impact. 50 feet, Park announced. "Airspeed 125, descent rate steady." Maya began the flare, gently pulling back on the yoke to raise the nose and reduce their descent rate. The timing had to be perfect. Too early, and they would stall and drop hard. Too late, and they would hit nose first at high speed. "Brace, brace, brace," Maya commanded as the water rushed up to meet them. The impact came with a tremendous splash and shudder, but Maya's technique was flawless. The tail touched first, then the main fuselage settled into the water with far less violence than anyone had expected. The aircraft skipped once across the surface like a stone, then settled into a stable float. Water cascaded across the cockpit windows, but the Boeing 737 remained intact and upright. Maya immediately began post-impact procedures, her hands moving across emergency systems with practiced efficiency. "All engines secured, emergency power activated, cabin pressure stable," she announced. "All exits are usable. Life rafts deploy automatically. Everyone remains calm and follows crew instructions for evacuation." Captain Turner stared at the instrument panel in disbelief. "Commander, that was the most perfect water landing I've ever witnessed. You saved every single life aboard this aircraft." Maya coordinated rescue operations with military precision. "Coast Guard Rescue, this is Flight AA 2847, emergency water landing completed successfully. All 180 souls aboard accounted for, aircraft floating stable. No injuries reported." "Outstanding work, Commander Johnson," came the immediate response. "That landing will be studied at the Naval Academy for years to come." Dr. Sterling approached Maya during evacuation, his face showing shame and gratitude. "Commander Johnson, I owe you my life and the most sincere apology possible. My behavior was inexcusable and nearly cost everyone their lives." Maya looked at him graciously. "Doctor, we all have unconscious biases. What matters is learning from this experience." Sarah Mitchell approached with tears streaming down her face. "Commander, I was wrong about everything. You tried to help from the beginning, and I shut you down because of my assumptions." "Sarah, next time listen before you assume someone isn't qualified based on appearances," Maya replied diplomatically. Mrs. Carter waited to thank Maya personally. "You're an angel, dear. You saved all our lives with such grace despite how terribly they treated you." "Just doing my job, Mrs. Carter," Maya replied, helping the elderly woman into the life raft. The rescue operation proceeded flawlessly. All passengers safely recovered within 25 minutes. The Boeing 737 floated peacefully in Puget Sound, testament to a Top Gun pilot's skill overcoming prejudice and assumptions. Within minutes of the successful water landing, Coast Guard helicopters filled the sky above Puget Sound like guardian angels. The rescue operation unfolded with textbook precision as professional swimmers guided life rafts toward waiting vessels. "All passengers and crew accounted for," the Coast Guard commander announced. "Zero fatalities, minimal injuries. This is one of the most successful emergency water landings in aviation history." Maya stood on the rescue vessel's deck, methodically checking passenger manifests to ensure every soul had been recovered safely. Her military bearing remained evident even soaked in civilian clothes. Captain Turner approached with reverence in his eyes. "Commander Johnson, in 20 years of flying, I've never witnessed anything like what you accomplished. The FAA will want to study your techniques for decades." "I was just doing what I was trained to do, Captain," Maya replied modestly. Dr. Sterling waited nearby, his expensive suit soaked and his arrogance completely evaporated. "Commander Johnson, what happened today has changed me fundamentally. You saved my life after I insulted and dismissed you in the cruelest way possible." Maya looked at him graciously. "Emergency situations reveal who we really are. What matters is how we choose to grow from this experience." Sarah Mitchell stood apart, tears streaking her face. "Commander, I don't deserve your forgiveness. I let prejudice nearly cost 180 lives." "Sarah," Maya said gently, "you were trying to protect passengers. The important thing is that we all learned about the danger of assumptions." News helicopters circled overhead as the story spread. Top Gun pilot saves 180 lives after being dismissed by flight crew. The Boeing 737 floated peacefully behind them, testament to skill triumphing over prejudice. Mrs. Carter approached Maya one final time. "Dear, you've shown everyone that heroes come in all forms, and we should never judge capabilities by appearance." Maya smiled genuinely for the first time since the crisis began. Sometimes, the most important lessons come from unexpected circumstances. Justice had been served through demonstration of truth over assumption, competence over prejudice, and grace over resentment. The story exploded across social media within hours of the rescue, transforming Maya Johnson from an unknown Navy pilot into a national symbol of hidden heroism and the dangers of prejudice. Video footage from passengers' phones showed the dramatic contrast between Sarah's initial dismissal and Maya's eventual command of the crisis, creating a viral sensation that reached millions of viewers worldwide. #Let the Women Handle began trending on Twitter within 6 hours as women across America shared their own stories of being underestimated in professional situations. The hashtag became a rallying cry for recognizing expertise regardless of gender, race, or appearance, with Maya's story serving as the perfect example of competence hidden in plain sight. Major news networks competed for exclusive interviews with Maya, though she maintained her characteristic humility throughout the media storm. During her appearance on CNN, she delivered a statement that would be quoted for years to come. "Heroes don't announce themselves with fanfare. Real expertise often comes quietly, ready to serve when needed. The person sitting next to you might be exactly the expert you need in a crisis." The airline industry responded swiftly to the incident, with American Airlines announcing new protocols for identifying and utilizing passenger expertise during emergencies. CEO Robert Thompson personally flew to Seattle to thank Maya and offer her a position as chief safety consultant, recognizing that her experience could help prevent similar situations in the future. Sarah Mitchell became an unexpected advocate for change within the aviation industry. Rather than hiding from her mistakes, she voluntarily enrolled in comprehensive bias training programs and began speaking at flight attendant conferences about the dangers of assumptions. Her presentation, titled "When Prejudice Nearly Cost 180 Lives," became mandatory viewing for airline crew training programs nationwide. "I let my preconceptions cloud my judgment in the most dangerous possible way," Sarah told a room of 300 flight attendants in Chicago. "I dismissed someone based on her appearance, her age, her race, and where she was sitting. It nearly killed everyone aboard that aircraft. We must do better." Dr. Robert Sterling's transformation was perhaps the most dramatic of all. The wealthy businessman who had so cruelly dismissed Maya's expertise now dedicated significant resources to supporting minority aviators and STEM education. He established the Maya Johnson Foundation with a $10 million endowment, focusing on providing flight training scholarships to underrepresented communities. "I was everything wrong with privileged assumptions," Sterling admitted during a televised interview. "Maya Johnson saved my life after I had treated her with inexcusable cruelty. The least I can do is ensure that future Maya Johnsons are recognized and supported from the beginning of their careers." The Federal Aviation Administration launched a comprehensive review of emergency procedures, incorporating Maya's water landing techniques into official training protocols. Her approach calculations and impact methodology were distributed to commercial pilots worldwide, potentially saving countless lives in future emergencies. Captain James Turner and First Officer Lisa Park both received commendations for their professionalism during the crisis, but they consistently redirected praise toward Maya's decisive leadership. "We followed standard procedures," Turner told aviation magazines. "Commander Johnson went beyond standard. She demonstrated exceptional skill under impossible circumstances." Mrs. Eleanor Carter became an unexpected celebrity in her retirement community, regaling anyone who would listen with stories of the angel pilot who had saved her life twice in one flight. Her granddaughter started a blog documenting her grandmother's experience, which became a viral sensation among older adults who shared their own stories of witnessing unexpected heroism. The Boeing 737 itself became a symbol of successful emergency procedures. After being recovered from Puget Sound and thoroughly inspected, the aircraft showed minimal structural damage, testament to Maya's exceptional landing technique. The plane was eventually returned to service with a commemorative plaque in the cockpit honoring Maya's life-saving skills. Maya returned to active duty with enhanced recognition throughout the military hierarchy. Her superiors, already aware of her exceptional abilities, now had public validation of her skills. She was fast-tracked for promotion and assigned to elite training programs where her emergency landing expertise could benefit other pilots. The story became required reading in leadership courses at the Naval Academy, business schools, and diversity training programs across corporate America. Maya's grace under pressure, her persistence in the face of dismissal, and her ultimate triumph became a template for discussions about unconscious bias and the importance of listening to all voices. 6 months after the incident, Maya was invited to speak at the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum. Standing before an audience that included many of the passengers from Flight AA 2847, she delivered a message that resonated far beyond aviation. Never assume you know someone's story based on what you see on the surface. The quiet person next to you might be your salvation. The cultural impact extended beyond individual transformation. Corporate diversity training programs began using Maya's story as a central case study, demonstrating how prejudice and assumptions could have catastrophic consequences in high-stakes situations. Her experience became shorthand for the importance of recognizing expertise wherever it might be found. Maya Johnson's extraordinary story serves as a powerful reminder that heroes walk among us every single day, often unrecognized and underestimated by a society that judges capability based on appearance rather than expertise. The quiet woman in economy class, the young person in casual clothes, the individual who doesn't fit our mental picture of qualified. Any of them might be exactly the expert we need when a crisis strikes. This isn't just a story about one flight or one remarkable pilot. It's about the countless Maya Johnsons in our workplaces, schools, and communities whose talents remain hidden because we fail to look beyond surface assumptions. How many brilliant solutions have been dismissed because the person offering them didn't match our expectations? How many potential heroes have been silenced before they had the chance to prove their worth? The most tragic aspect of Flight AA 2847 wasn't the bird strike or the engine failure. It was how close prejudice came to preventing the very expertise that saved everyone aboard. Sarah Mitchell's assumptions, Dr. Sterling's condescension, and the passengers' dismissive attitudes nearly cost 180 lives because they couldn't see past their own biases. Maya's grace in the face of humiliation, her persistence despite rejection, and her ultimate triumph remind us that true leadership isn't about demanding recognition. It's about serving others regardless of whether that service is acknowledged or appreciated. She didn't reveal her identity to prove a point. She revealed it to save lives when all other options had been exhausted. The real lesson extends far beyond aviation emergencies. In boardrooms and classrooms, hospitals and courtrooms, the next breakthrough idea or life-saving solution might come from the person everyone least expects. The intern with the fresh perspective, the maintenance worker who understands the machinery, the quiet student who sees what others miss. These are the Maya Johnsons of everyday life. We live in a world that often judges competence by confidence, expertise by appearance, and worth by wealth. Maya Johnson's story challenges us to look deeper, listen more carefully, and never assume we know someone's capabilities based on where they sit or how they dress. If Maya's story moved you, if it made you think about your own assumptions or remember a time when you were underestimated, don't let that feeling fade. Hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Post it on your social media with your own story of hidden talents or unexpected heroes. In the comments below, tell us about a Maya Johnson in your own life, someone who surprised you with their expertise, someone whose talents were overlooked, or share your own experience of being underestimated. Your story might inspire someone else to speak up when their moment comes, or help someone recognize the expert sitting right beside them. Subscribe to our channel for more stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things when the moment demands it. Because heroes really do come from the most unexpected places, and their stories deserve to be told, shared, and celebrated. Remember Maya Johnson the next time you're tempted to judge someone's capabilities by their appearance. Remember her the next time someone offers help that doesn't match your expectations. And remember her message. Never assume you know someone's story based on what you see on the surface. The person next to you, in the meeting, on the bus, in the coffee shop, might just be your salvation. Treat them accordingly because someday they might save your life.